In this video, we're going to look at the recursive multiplication problem from your textbook. The problem tells us to design a recursive function that accepts two arguments into the parameters x and y. The function should return the value of x times y. So we're simply going to write a recursive function that multiplies two numbers. The program reminds us that multiplication can be performed as repeated addition, and it gives us the example that 7 times 4 is equal to 4 added to itself 7 times, 4 plus 4 plus 4, and so on. Also, we're told to keep things simple. We're going to assume that x and y will always hold positive non-integer values. Now, when the problem gives you this example of 7 times 4 being equal to 4 added to itself 7 times, this is sort of a hint as to the way that you can approach this problem. So if we try to think of a recursive way that we can express this repeated addition, we might be on the right track. For example, 7 times 4 is equal to 4 added to itself 7 times. But another way of thinking about that is that 7 times 4 is equal to 4 plus 6 times 4. Okay, well, here we have another multiplication. It's a smaller version of the original multiplication, and we can recursively think about this part of the problem. 6 times 4 is the same thing as 4 plus 5 times 4. And 5 times 4 is the same thing as 4 plus 4 times 4. And 4 times 4 is the same thing as 4 plus 3 times 4. So you can see the pattern that's evolving here. The multiplication is being systematically reduced to a smaller version of the original problem. So here we have 3 times 4. That's the same thing as 4 plus 2 times 4. And 2 times 4 is the same thing as 4 plus 1 times 4. And 1 times 4 is the same thing as 4 plus 0 times 4. So, and that's as far as we can go when we get down to 0. Then that's what we call the base case of the problem. So this sort of lays the framework of the way that we can create a recursive algorithm to perform this multiplication. Our base case being when really either when x or y, when either of the parameters is equal to 0, then we've reached the base case, and that's where the recursion can end. Okay, so now that we sort of see the way that we're going to think about this, let's switch over to the Python interpreter, and let's see if we can write some code that will actually work. So before we write our recursive function in a program, we're going to try the code out here in the Python shell in the interactive mode interpreter, and that way we can we can confirm that we're thinking along the right lines. So the name of the function is going to be multiply, because that's what it does. It multiplies two values, and the problem tells us that we are to have two parameters x and y. So the first thing that I'm going to do in the function is test for the base case. Now you can recall that a moment ago I said that when either x is equal to 0 or y is equal to 0, then we've reached the base case, and at that point we no longer want any recursive calls. And it makes sense in this problem because here we're multiplying two numbers, x and y. So if either one of those is equal to 0, then we've reached the end of our the end of our process of reduction. And when 0 times any is multiplied times any number, it's 0. So we're going to return the value 0 when we reach the base case. Okay, so that's going to handle the base case. The else clause here is going to handle the recursive case. Now, the recursive case is the part of the function that calls itself. So in the recursive case, we're also going to have a return statement. We're going to return the value of x plus And here we're going to recursively call the function x plus the value of x multiplied times y minus 1. So each time we recursively call the function, we're going to reduce the value of y by 1. Okay, so there's the function written in the Python shell. So now we can test it out. I'm just going to call the function a few times with various values. So if we pass 2 and 5, we should get 10, and that's what we get. Let's pass 10 and 100, and it gives us 1,000. That's correct. Let's try one more. Let's try 0 and 100. Should get 0, and that's what we get. So with this minimal amount of testing, it looks like the function is working. Okay, so now let's look at a program that uses this function. This is a very simple program that uses the function. You'll notice that we have a main function, and then here we have the recursive multiply function, and then here we have the statement that gets things going when we run the program. This statement here calls the main function. So in the main function, the first thing that we do is get two numbers from the user. We just ask the user to enter a number and enter another number, and those two values will be referenced by the variables num1 and num2. And then we just have a statement that calls the print function, and it prints the product of those two numbers. We print this message, their product is, followed by the value returned from the multiply function, and we pass num1 and num2 as the arguments into the parameters x and y. So let's go ahead and run this program and try some example values. 2 and 10, that gives us 20. Okay, let's run it again. 10 and 100, that gives us 1,000. And again, 15 and 0, that gives us 0. So once again, just a minimum amount of testing, but it seems to indicate that our function is working.